So from last episode, we did the triangle and square, and for this one, we will have a little twist. We will build on the last one and make something that goes like this. So we will transform from one red square, split it into two. Well, there are two red squares overlaying each other, but then we should have two red squares from one spot, and we'll transform into one green triangle and one blue circle. So this is what we're doing. In case you don't in case you delete it or you didn't save last class progress, in the lessons folder, I have prepared you the sort of like the model file from last class. All right, so let's try to start from there. So I'm going to close this, or I'm going to open up the project from the folder, and it should give me this one. This should be about the same as yours if you have made one. Now, the first thing is that I don't like how when I open this file, they're already halfway through the transformation. This is actually the exact halfway of the transformation. The reason being so is because perimeter angle X has a default value of 0. 0? Yeah, 0. And the minimum is -30 and the maximum is +30, which is the beginning and end point of it. I want to set the beginning point to the actual beginning point. So we should start at -30. How to do so? Well, quick way to do this is that you go to set perimeter, and then you want to find angle X and edit it. You want the default value to be -30. Press OK, and when next time you start this file, you should start at this point. So we got a couple of things happening. First of all, we've been using black square, and we need to update the texture list instead of redoing the whole thing. Then how do we do that? We could go to texture edit, and you would see the black square texture file that we used in last lesson. Now there's a replace button, and obviously we can replace it with the red one. So let's click on replace. It will warn you every time that you want to replace this texture, because once you replace this one, you may have lost the older one. So the current one, if you do not have a backup file out there, then this may be gone forever, which, it's important that you always back up things like those. So let's press yes, and let's browse the folder again, the lesson 1.6 folder, and we want the 1.6 texture object PNG. Press open, and this time we have two extra texture right here. However, long as the square remains the same position as the last black square, then it would take the exact area to display. Press OK, and you should see the square turn red. And if you do this, you will see the red square turning into the red triangle and red circle. So we got that. Now we need to import the new ones. However, I don't think we need the guide image for this lesson. So let's turn it off, and we can see the full redness of things. However, I want to redo the triangle actually, because something didn't come across my mind last class. First of all, let's start with renaming all the stuff, because we're going to add some objects, and that's going to get messy. So let's call this square T, indicating this is square to triangle, and press OK. And I want the draw order to be 500. Also, you got to go to the other end of the perimeter and also change it to 500, because draw order, just like opacity, is something you can change in between key points. You cannot change name in between key points, so you cannot call this square and call this circle by the end of it. However, draw order and opacity are things that are two values that could be dynamic over the course of a transformation. So we got the 500, 500, and the other is called the square circle, or square C. And I also want the draw order to be 500, 500, and 500. Remember, whenever you change these values, you have to press enter. Don't want to click away, because if you click away like that, go back to it, it may not save the last change. So it's important to click, if I say 800 and I click this one, I don't think it will save. Oh, actually it does. Well, I don't know how, but sometimes it doesn't, alright? So let's keep it 500, and that's good. And now I'm going to redo this triangle, because it came across my mind because there's a very simple way to do this triangle. So let's delete the square T after renaming all that. Let's delete the square T, and let's add a texture and give another square for transformation. I'm just going to do that first, and that's what I need, and I'll go with 2 points. And I guess I have to turn back on my guide image because I don't know where I'm going to and don't know the size of things. So let's do that again. Draw order of 500, which is just right, but I need the name to be square T. So I got square T going on. Right. Do I? Yes. And let's move it. By the end of it, I want to move it here. And I mean, simply move the points like this. And there you go. We have a fairly nice triangle already for us. Now the reason it didn't come across my mind last class is because this occasion doesn't happen often. Like there's rarely a case where you have less dots down, all the way down to 4 dots could actually do a better job than having at least 16 of them, right? So, but however, in this class, I need that for a point that I'll prove shortly. Actually, I want the other way around. I want this one to this one. Okay. Oops, it's not nice, but it's okay. Actually, let's do this point. How about that? Why would it transform my things? Oh, I think it reinterprets the whole thing. Well, you know what? It doesn't matter if I have like 2 or 3 points at this point. I guess I'll go with that. As you can see, the transformation goes a little bit more smoother, and it's more sensible in this from, merging these 2 points. So we have one side gone and turn 4 sides into 3 sides, and there you go, a square to a triangle. But then now we have to turn off the guide image, and let's lock these 2 squares because I don't want to touch them when I'm working with the other objects. So the final check, that's good. And let's get into this point, and let's go to edit texture. Now let's click on rough layer and not select any object, and then edit texture. The triangle wise, I want to do this like this. You may think 3 point would make things simple and easy, but since that we are transforming it into a four-sided shape, then it's better if we have 4 dots and then expand it. So let's give a perimeter for the triangle, and let's move over to the square. And the square can be our guide image already, so we don't need an extra guide image. Now simply let's do this. And do that. And we have pretty much a nice square. However, I don't like this pointy dots. But what option do I have? Because there's only 3 points controlling this area, and there's no point for me to do this. So if I really want to be very, I guess, strict about this, I can go in here and create some points around this area. Make sure all of them are triangles. Press OK. Now then I find myself a point here to turn it into a nicer square. So we got a square done. And however, the other point is obviously not where it has to go. So we gotta move the whole thing over down here. which is already a nice triangle right there. What happens? Now we have a fairly decent transformation from a square to a triangle. However, I want it to go from red to green, not like now it's green to green covering the whole red. So how do we do that? Well, as I said, opacity it's something dynamic. It's a dynamic value that you can change in the course of transformation. So when it is in a square shape, I just need this thing to disappear. And slowly when it turns into a triangle, it reappears. So we got the red square into a green triangle. Now you see some area poking out, the red area poking out, and it's not really the exact shape. Well, unless all the dots are identically transforming the exact pattern, otherwise you cannot have this perfect shape, and you probably don't need that. Even for real practice, when you are working with the character model, and you may use this you may use this method for eye blinking or mouth talking, but you wouldn't need the exact, you just need a rough estimate, and that should be good enough. Now, there are ways to do things better, but I'll talk about that later. I don't want to talk about this in this lesson, but that is fairly okay. And now we can do the circle. So let's go back to here and also lock the triangle. Make sure we don't accidentally click it. So let's click on nothing and go into edit texture and do that again. This time we need a circle. Now I don't know at this point I don't know what kind of polygon arrangement that would be best for this transformation, but let's go with the plain square. And let's put it here. Oh, I forgot to give the parameters. The end of it, I need it to be here, just like the other square, and covering it like an ellipse. Now the reason why we need the if we're making the shape disappear by the end of it, why do we still need to reshape it into a square? Why do we need to make that identical endpoint if it's going to be gone? Well, here's how I'm going to show you. If we have circle disappear here and fully appear here, even though it's gone, you can see that the synchronization is not happening too well, because at this point we have a square slowly transforming into a fluffy square, which is midpoint. This is fluffy square, right? And then all the way to a circle, but the circle remains circle all time, so it wouldn't be a smooth transition. We can try to change the square to a bottom layer and see how it goes. So let's go to bottom layer, and let's say when it gets actually let me see, that's a bottom. So let's have the red square circle disappear, so it shows the circle. Now even if we have the square behind the circle and the circle behind a square halfway through, still it's not the nicest transition, because there's no way that two different shapes interchanging with just opacity would do a good job. Now let's try to you know what, let's try to go with the square. Higher opacity. What if the square don't even, like, even the square, let's say the square doesn't even transform into a circle. So let's go to object and maintain area original shape. This is what happens. So we can do this and tell the square, you know what, square, just disappear at the end of this, just disappear at the end of this transition. And let's turn off the triangle things. And you can see, you may think that if they're interchanging, why can't you just interchange the opacity? Well, this is what is happening. You only have one thing disappear, the other things appear. And the other problem is that when you're at this point, midway, both objects are about 50% opacity. And there are chances that it may show anything behind these two objects, which makes it even more weird, because you got a ghost image, like a transparent thing going on, and if this is the eye of the mouth or the mouth, that would be completely a disaster, because your mouth would show the teeth or anything behind, like the face or blushes or anything behind that. So it's not gonna work just that. What we want is that one object to be full opacity all the time. The object has to be at the bottom. So square is at the bottom, right? And I want the square has to be full opacity all the time. That's the first criteria. So no matter when, square is always full opacity. And the other thing is that square has to, and both shapes has to change into each other. So we got square at the bottom, full opacity and turning to a circle. That's one point of it. The other point is that the circle also has to turn to a square. So let's go back to the circle, turn it up, or else we can't see. Turn it up. And now we have to turn this into a square. Now we don't have the dots for anything, right? So let's go make some dots. This time I'll go with a star. So I got this. Something like that. Press OK. And now I got something to work with. So let's start with moving this to the corner, moving this to the corner, this to the corner, and that. 4 corners. Now this is obviously not a square, it's more like a flower, and because we have these sides poking out. So let's push this one in to push the sides in so that it doesn't exceed the border. Now it's within the border of the square. Now there's another problem, is that now I have this part undercutting. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to push this up. But wait, I can push one side up. I cannot push all 4 sides up. So this is the point when you realize that your dots aren't enough. All right, when you realize that you can only do one side but not the other, or making another side worse, then you need more sides to do things. So let's try to divide by 4. We got this. Well, that's a little bit too much. I think we can just do by, let me think again. What do we need? We need something around here in between these 2 dots. There's a midpoint, then I can work with it. Which means that in between this point and this point, if I got something around here or here, that would do. So let's go with something safe in the middle. Now this simple conclusion doesn't happen all the time, because for some cases you might want to do here, some cases you want to do here, depending on how much distortion you're allowed it to do, because some texture don't allow distortion. For say, like if you're working with the iris, the pupil of your character, right? And it's supposed to be many circles in the center, and if you stretch one side, then the circle may look out of shape, and she may appear, or the character may appear not looking at the viewer. So we'll get to that later, but in this case, stretching doesn't matter much since it's a solid blue circle, so we can do this. We are allowed to put anywhere, and it should work out fine. I can actually merge this like that, pull it together, get a sharp edge, pull it together, get a corner, get this part in, get this part out. So yeah, when all the dots are turning into a square, then obviously you get a square out of it. So now we got the circle turning into a square, and last thing we need is to make it disappear so that the square will reappear. So we got red square into, I guess, purple fluffy square, and then a pretty nice blue circle. Oh, well, do I want the red square at the back to appear? In other cases, in real application, yes, I want this to appear most of the time, unless I don't mind having a ghost image right here. In this case, in this practice, I would say just make the square disappear for now. So at the end, I want the square to be gone completely. So we got this. Turn back on the triangles and let's have a look. Red square and nice shape. to get a green and get the circle. So that's about it. Remember to change your names for things. A better practice triangle, and I'll call the circle circle. And double check the draw orders. Remember, you want the square to be below the other shapes. Alright, so square is at 500. Both ends of the perimeter, all the active perimeters, they're always at 500. That's good. Turn this off. And let's look at the triangle. This one is a 500, which is exactly the same as a square. So let's turn it up. Let's make it to 600. And the endpoint also 600. Circle, let's push it up to 600 and 600. So now we make sure that the square and the triangle and circle will always be on top of the square, and always, as I say always because no matter which point of the active perimeter, it's always going to be. All right, let's make a extra experiment. So let's turn on the circle, and let's turn off the triangle. So you see the circle, and the square, I would also turn it up all the time. So now let's try to have the circle starting at 600 draw order and ends at 400. Now, since the circle is 400, it will be behind the square. Now this becomes transition, is that at some point it flashes behind the square. Boom, just like that. That's because in the square's reality is that the draw order is decreasing every second, every frame right here. From 600, midpoint is 500, and then when it gets to 499, it's behind the square, and that's why past midpoint it would flash into a red thing because it turns into a square part on top. Alright, so this is a immediate change of things. If you say like, I don't want to end at 400, what if I end at 499? What you'll get is that at this last moment, boom, it would turn into a red last moment. That's because in between this frame and the first frame, it goes from 499 to 500 and 501, and that's why this is where the interchange happens. Alright, so be aware of your draw order, unless this is the effect you want to result. Otherwise, you have to remain them in the same draw order in order to have that gradual transitioning. So let's give the square 0 right here, and you got the smooth transition. Turn back on the triangle, and there you go.